We're here this morning to talk a little bit about taste and the role that food and beverage plays in the luxury travel experience. And I can't think of two more qualified panelists to join me up here to talk about that. And I'd like to bring them to the stage now. Mr. M.P.S. Puri, the Chief Executive of Nara Hotels and Resorts, and Janice Wong, the acclaimed chef and restaurateur. All right, Puri, I'm going to start with you. You have put food and drink at the very center of the guest experience for 4 decades now. Why is that?
Well, because I think anytime you go on a holiday or anytime you do anything, food is hugely important. Food really is any ceremony that you have. There's a anniversary or a birthday or a wedding or anything that is of any significance. There's always food involved. So food is an integral part of any celebration. It's an integral part of everything we do. And we all tend to eat at least twice a day, maybe sometimes 3 times or more. So it is important.
At a Conde Nast conference, it would be 1 time a day. That's a fashion joke, sorry.
But really, it's such an integral part of our lives. And that's why when I founded Nara, one of the key statements that we made as part of Nara was that the culinary art is sacred at Nara. One must eat well. When oftentimes you go somewhere and you don't eat well, it's a disappointment.
That's absolutely true, especially in a high dining establishment. Now, Janice, you run such establishments, and you do so here in Singapore, in a city that kind of balances haute cuisine with hawker cuisine. And you have developed amazing menus that manage to bridge that divide. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think for us, we've always tried to be a leader instead of a follower. I think for us was to not only give people good taste, good flavor, but also the good experience. The experience is what people remember most these days, you know, instead of just only the taste. I think people just really want to enjoy it.
So how do you manage that experience in your restaurants?
I mean, by thinking different, first of all, that's how we create that experience. How can we divide ourselves from the rest of the world and then us? I think a lot of our restaurants, for example, in Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Singapore, they are partially quite different from the rest of the other restaurants, and they stand out because you can find these type of experiences where you have savory and sweet at the same page together. And that's why we started this whole thing. But again, how we started was really by thinking different. The first baby step was just to divide ourselves. Yeah.
So, Puri, I'm going to turn to you for a second because I think that there's a degree of kind of magic and theatricality to managing that divide between high and low. And I'm turning to you because I think of your restaurant Fish Shack in Mauritius, which would appear to be a beachside shack of no particular importance, even if it's great. You know, it's not a high dining establishment. And yet that is not the case. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that?
Yeah, I think, you know, first of all, if you go on holiday to a beach destination, what you're looking for is to be able to truly experience that, right? So the Fish Shack is on the beach, and you sit there eating freshly caught fish, eating a beautiful heart of palm salad with the heart of palm been freshly cut in front of you. You're drinking a local beer, you're drinking a local rum, and it really arouses and awakens the primordial instincts in you. You know, that's really what we want, the primordial instincts. And you're not going to get that. If I have in Mauritius a 3-star Michelin restaurant, French food ain't going to do the trick.
Once that was the case, though, you could not have done business without a 3-star Michelin French restaurant.
Possibly, yes. Right. Possibly, yes. But I think today people are looking for local, original, authentic, real experiences. And what can be more beautiful than sitting on the beach under the stars, watching a Sega dance, a local Sega dance, and eating freshly caught fish and eating a beautiful hearts of palm salad.
Yeah. Janice, yesterday we heard a great deal about changing demographics in luxury travel. And we heard a great deal about young millennial millionaires coming from all over Asia and traveling widely, and what they are interested in. And we heard just now, again this morning, wine tastings are important to them, skiing is important to them, and fine dining is important to them. I wonder, how are you, if you are, catering to that market, that millennial market?
Very much so. I guess in 3 of our markets, very much so, we are catering to the young millennials. But most of all, I think it's the women. I think our demographics are changing a lot because what we cater to are mostly 80% to women, especially in Japan. In Singapore, when I first started in 2007, about 80% to 85% were all women diners. And women are getting more and more influential, and they love to have more good experiences.
I think that's true, but I also think that 85% or even 60% women in your seats is you're over-indexing there. Why do you think that's the case?
I mean, for me, women really love, it's a sweet palate that they have. However, in Japan, we have recently seen also more male dining in early in the morning for desserts, which I see this as a culture shock for all of us, but it is true. I mean, the numbers are true.
So by early in the morning, do you mean post-izakaya or after waking up?
After waking up, 11 a.m. in the morning. They queue up at 9:45 a.m. for a dessert. This is really unheard of, and I couldn't believe it, but consistently we see now men coming in the morning for a dessert experience. But it's not the dessert, it's the experience that
And what experience are they having, do you reckon?
Not just only the sweets, but also the sweet and the sake. So we have a full-fledged sake pairing with 12 desserts, for example.
At 11 a.m.?
At 11 a.m., yeah. I'm not kidding you.
Puri, how about you? What are you seeing in terms of a millennial market at the hotels and resorts?
Well, I think what we're seeing is an affinity for some ancient recipes. You know, they want to be able to find stuff that is restorative. Yeah, healthy foods. You know, I think that we've never had a situation where people were more concerned or more obsessed with health. Vegans, and somebody's a vegan, somebody's a vegetarian, another person is on a gluten-free diet, another person is on a paleo diet, and today, if you receive an invitation for a dinner party, on the thing you have the RSVP, and below that you also need to list what your dietary restrictions or your allergies are. You go to a restaurant anywhere in a big city, or also in our hotels and small, and the waiter comes up to the table and he says, "Ma'am, sir, do you have any allergies? Do you have any dietary restrictions?" So that's becoming really important.
Let me stop you just for a second to turn to you, Janice, because I find it interesting that on the menu here in Singapore, I don't know if this is the case in Tokyo or Hong Kong, on the savory side, each menu item is accompanied by an explanation of whether it's high gluten, medium gluten, low gluten, whether it's potato starch or what kind of flour is being used. And that seemed to me, as I looked at it, like that's the difference between high and medium and low gluten. That if that comes to New York, we're doomed. I mean,
It's true.
so is that in response to, as Puri has noted, a rise in a kind of millennial obsession with health, or?
Well, I also think it's not just only health, but education. I think people really want to know these days what goes into their food. I guess in the past it was just always about the enjoyment and they couldn't care less about everything else. But times have changed and people want to know, for example, there's high gluten flour, for example, in my siumai. In my normal wonton dumplings, I'm just using medium gluten flour. So the education part is very important, and it's our duty as chefs as well to explain that. So we do have little emoticons that say, for example, there's no flour in this. There's, we use a different type of, cornmeal, for example. We do that. So it's nice, and they appreciate it.
Puri, on a larger scale, when across across your empire. I like saying that, across Puri's empire. How do you set up menus or food and beverage programs that allow for someone to come in and say, I'm paleo, or I identify as paleo, or what have you? Does this put undue strain on your kitchen staffs?
Not really. First of all, let me qualify one thing. It's not an empire. I only have 5 operating hotels, so it's a very small empire.
I only have 2. It seems like an empire.
No, it's part of the culture. It's something that has now become common practice. I mean, it's like in previous times when the chefs put together menus. I don't know if you all remember the old menus. In a French restaurant, you would go and you'd receive this huge menu. You know, you'd have the appetizers, and then you'd have the poisson, and then you have the viande, and then you had all those things. So chefs were able to create those too. Today, the dynamics have changed, and so we need to be more mindful about this. But everyone, and the chefs and all, are fully equipped to be able to do that.
So I had an
I think chefs now also need an education in nutrition, and most good chefs do, and that helps them to be able to achieve that.
Although it's complicated. I'm not booking a high-end vacation, and because I guess some people would do so to have a cleanse, right? But I also I'm there to indulge on some level, and so I would imagine you have to balance that desire for healthy, nutritious eating, spa cuisine, we'll call it, with the desire to eat a big steak or a big piece of protein and a giant martini, what have you. So I had this editor, Tina Brown, who was at the Tatler in London and then New Yorker and Vanity Fair. And when I worked for her, she was always and forever calling me into the office to say, what's hot? What's hot? And I thought I would bring that, I thought I would bring that to you, share my pain by saying, what's hot? And I don't mean necessarily, we've talked about these trends in kind of dietary restrictions. I mean in terms of ingredients and styles of cooking that you're seeing both in your travels and in your hotels. Can I begin with you?
Sure. I mean, what's hot these days are really things that are more nutritious, more healthy. I myself am more aware. I think the awareness is what's trending with the healthy diet, and it's so easily accessible these days. I mean, if I take an airplane and I just want to have juice, I want to just cleanse, I could have a good meal up in the air. When I touch down, I could be of easy reach again of a nice bowl of salad. So I guess that for me, that's what is different these days.
We're going to come back to that in just a sec. But Puri, what about you? What are you seeing?
I'm going to, if you'll indulge me for a second, I'm going to talk about something here. And to give you a bit of a historic perspective, in 2000, it was nose to tail. And most of you will remember the restaurant, St. John's Restaurant in London.
Sure.
It was all about eating nose to tail. And then 2004, when all of you remember when Noma became so wildly popular and the best restaurant in the world, it was neo-Nordic. So René Redzepi with Noma, best restaurant. Then in 2006, it became gourmetification. And so places like the Soho House and what they were doing with food. And then 2012, and you can see the progression, now it goes from shoot to root. So it's from farm to table, and now the new thing is shoot to root. Vegetables are no longer playing a culinary bit part. In London, the Clove Club and Bruno Lobé and so on have been making greens from shoot to root, central to a dish, while the meat or fish element plays second fiddle as a garnish. So those are some of the things that are going on as far as trending. But then I think also, local, original, thoughtful stuff, and celebrating the local farmers and celebrating the destination. And in my experience and in my world, I think hedonism is out, and it's more about austerity. It's more about being mindful, being thoughtful. So where hedonism was really the thing to do, and you had these glorious lunches and dinners and so on, it's a bit more restricted. I also see when it comes to beverages, less alcohol and more marijuana, and America is leading the way on that.
But this presents a big problem for hotels and restaurants, right? I mean, food and beverage accounts for a big part of the bottom line for a hotel, and for a restaurant, alcohol is extremely important. Now, 11 a.m. sake tastings with dessert seems to be a pretty good way of keeping yourself in the black. But I wonder, in the world of luxury travel, where hedonism played such an important role in our understanding of what our experience was going to be like, how you're going to make money, absent selling marijuana, without unloading, Petrus's and tomahawk steaks and the like.
I think that we still can make money. I mean, some of our destinations where guests simply don't leave. They stay, they spend most of their times there. I have a place in a small village in the mountains in Switzerland, and from breakfast to going out skiing, to coming back for an après-ski drink and having dinner, they do everything at the hotel. So it still makes up for the difference. But whilst people are not consuming some of those really high-end stuff, there's still a role for things that are new and interesting and things that they get educated on. And so they're still spending money.
Okay, but I'm going to ask a hard question about it.
Okay.
A long time ago, when you reopened Raffles here, I assumed that food and beverage was a significant driver of revenue. Yes?
It was the significant driver.
It was
yes.
a decent driver of revenue, so it was a great driver of revenue. If that's not the case, are you really making up for it with, I mean, you have a kind of high or low vacancy rate anyway. Where does that revenue really come from?
Well, it's a matter of having to reinvent ourselves to be able to meet the consumer demands and what they really want.
We're going to go to questions in a little bit, and it would be great, since a lot of you are operators or near to operators, if we could plumb that question a little bit. I'm fascinated to know, in a world where you're not selling $400 bottles of wine, where you're getting that $400. Let me switch back to you, Janice, for a second to ask, in your properties, let's start in Singapore. What is the #1 menu item? What do you sell the most of?
In Singapore, since 2007, it's always been anything with chocolate. And then we had to adjust. I mean, I'm a big fan of fruits and vegetables, which counts for about 80% of our menu in Japan because of the way of the culture and the habits. But in Singapore, I mean, we had to adjust. We still consistently keep it at a high percentage of
high chocolate percentage.
Chocolate
and on the savory side?
Items. On the savory side, I would say definitely things with beef, foie gras, things that are really still very luxurious in a way, but yet a little bit more affordable. So you're not paying, for example, $35 for a little piece of foie gras, for example. So these would be the top items on the menu.
So it is interesting, right, to wrestle with that a little bit. That I accept that everything that you say is true. I've seen it myself in my own reporting, and yet still a foie gras entree, a foie gras congee sells beautifully well, and of course chocolate sells very well. And it's impossible because your properties are all over the world, but is that still the case for you as well? To say, like, even against this background, you're still moving some beef and red wine.
Definitely.
So in New York City, there's this concept of the whale, and the whale is a customer who can be reliably counted upon to give you a lot of money. It sounds to me, from what you guys are saying, that whale, if you have such a thing here, is a little harder to find. Is that the case? Or in your case, there's such a line that maybe volume makes up for it. But I'm interested, especially against the backdrop of this understanding that there's this flood of millennial millionaires coming into the world that you serve. whether money is coming from volume or whether there are still high flyers and big spenders. Why don't we start with you, Pori?
I think what we're finding, all of us are finding this, is that the frequency of going out has increased a lot. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of places. I spend a fair amount of time in London. There's just a lot of democratically priced restaurants, like I like to say that. But you know, you might end up with a carpaccio of a scallop, which is one scallop sliced so thin that it's called a carpaccio, but it's only for like 4 or 5 pounds. So what we're seeing is people coming out more often. They want to spend 30, 35 pounds per person when they go out in the evenings, which includes a drink or two, but they're going out 3, 4 times a week, sometimes more, because don't forget, I mean, people are in a city like London, people are living in small apartments that are 30, 40 square meters. So they're not entertaining at home. They want to be able to go out. They need to go out. And so the frequency has increased. And that's where some of the business is coming from, the increased volume.
Janice, how about you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in Singapore, things are changing because we started, I think, about 3 to 4 years ago, this casual dining, this casual fine dining, and you get a very good experience, good quality ingredients, and like you said, you pay about $40 to $60 per head, and the frequency is a lot. I mean, I myself, for example, would go out and dine maybe like 4 to 5 times a week, just because I don't have the time to cook, and I get a good, quick experience. I pay maybe about $50 a head. I get a good drink and good quality ingredients. So the trend now is that in Singapore we have a huge boom of these restaurants opening up, and fine dining is kind of I would say you would think about it before opening up a fine dining, and in the past we just went ahead with that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's an excellent turning point to you, because I know it to be the case that fine dining is or has been extraordinarily important to the bottom line of luxury travel, for hotels, for high rent and high-end restaurants across the world. And our panelists are saying that this is changing. You may agree, I imagine you do, but you may have questions about that. And so let's take a couple of those.
You talked a lot about increased dining and people dining out 3, 4, 5 times a week. And clearly the democratization of dining out is happening because of things, reality television, MasterChef, all of these kinds of phenomenons. And I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on that, all of the reality television and everybody can be a great chef, and the notion of chefs as rock stars because they are the new rock stars. That's clearly driving the profile, but is it a good thing? Is it going to continue? I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I'm sitting next to a rock star, so you have the experience. Why don't you field that one?
Actually, on the contrary, last night I saw a video of what Marco Pio White said. He said that TV chef rock stars, as you say, they're more personalities. They are not cooks. That's why they're rock stars, because they're a great TV personality. So there's a difference between a cook, a chef, and as well as a chef personality. So I would say I would hope to be on this side. I still love to be in the kitchen, but back to your question, yes, it is changing for sure. I've met a lot of people across the world that they said, well, it's so approachable now that you would think that all home cooks are really good cooks as well. You can easily assess information. If I want to cook a very good piece of fish, for example, if I want to sous vide my fish, how do I do it? In the past, 10 years ago, it's so difficult to find that information. You would probably have to go to the bookstore and look through one of these books that talk about, slow cooking. But now in 1 minute, I get all the information, I see a clip, 15 seconds on taste, and then I can cook a great piece of steak. So I guess for sure, but back to your question, this is definitely changing, and this has made it also more accessible to people to cook at home. and also the knowledge when they go out and dine. They would be able to tell a good steak and what's not. So.
Well, thank you for plugging nytcooking.com, your online recipe source and instruction guide. I hope you will all sign up for my newsletter and enjoy learning to cook better as a result. Thank you, Janice, for that. But it's really interesting. I think, to answer your question, I'm not qualified to answer it, but I do it anyway. That's what the New York Times does. 15 years ago, there was a real divide between the showman Guy Fieri chefs and the hardworking, brilliant chefs who are back in the kitchen. But what's interesting to me is we're seeing an increase in people like Janice making it on TV and being successful and showing their skill without crossing over a line into cartoon. And you're an example of that. I think Gabrielle Hamilton of Prune in New York is an example of that. And it's a very interesting leveling that we're seeing. Sir.
Hi, Puri. Mohan Mulani from here.
remember
Hotels have been trending between, in the past, between hotel owners and operators, between owning, outsourcing restaurants. They've gone back and forth. There's been, in the past, it was always the operator did, then it came to a point where they wanted to just outsource everything, and now I think it's I don't know where it's at. But as a potential hotel owner-operator, what advice or input can you give on how one should look at, as operating your own restaurant and outsourcing it?
Personally, I mean, I don't believe in outsourcing purely because I think one should have the skill set to be able to do it yourself. And sometimes it's really a pity to be able to see prime location, because some of the hotels, whether it's in major cities here in Singapore, Hong Kong, London, wherever, it's prime real estate. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to make it work. So if a chef from outside can come and make it work, so can you.
Well, in New York, what we're seeing is that the hotel operator or the developer of the hotel is looking to put a name chef in that space in order to make a name for himself and bring people into the space and
Right.
make a name for the hotel. Is that not true in other parts of the world?
I mean, just take a look at Hyatt. We're sitting here at Hyatt, and Hyatt internationally has successfully demonstrated that they can run their own food and beverage without ever bringing in an outside operator. They do it well in Shanghai, they do it well in Paris, they do it well in New York, they do it well across the board. So it's a matter of having a culture within your own organization that considers food and beverage to be an integral part of your operation. It's easy to outsource, right? So to be able to bring in a brand name chef, it's an easy thing to do. Not something that I sort of recommend or something that I'm a proponent of.
We're talking about democratization of luxurious ingredients. And Vietnam is now a new destination for culinary delights. I would like to invite you. Journey to the East has a video out there. We now produce also caviar in Vietnam, and restaurants are now using the local caviar to serve for fine dining. So outside there is a short video about the caviar in Vietnam.
All right, we'll take a gander. Sir?
So to Janice's question, pertaining to you in terms of liking to be in the kitchen, how do you balance that aspect of your work with the kind of investors and shareholders who want you to scale?
Yep. That's a very good question. Well, you don't think about it. I think I never think about the balance. The big question is always, as a woman, especially as a woman, that question gets asked a lot. How do you balance? And I always think, why do men don't get that question? But it's true. You just don't think about it. You really put all your effort into every single area of your work. In terms of the creative part, I love to be a creative. I am a creative, but at some point, you still also have to be on the other side, the management and the scalability. I have kept my roots here in Singapore for 9 years, and I've always wanted to scale. However, I've kept it very lean because I wanted to put all resources back into research before scaling. And now when we have had 9 years of these experiences, we are able to scale at quite an enormous pace. I mean, this year we opened 3 new restaurants. Next year we will open more. I'm not disclosing where yet, but basically.
Come on.
But basically,
How about a hemisphere?
No. No. But back to your question, I think it's very important to put your hand into still everything, but being in touch with what you do, also spending a lot of your time kind of categorizing, which is important. So I always say to my staff, we have so much time in the world. We really have a lot of time, and we're never really too busy.
So, but let me follow up on that, because it's a question I ask a lot of chefs, male and female, as they develop more than one property and look to expand and look to scale. And the question goes to, I've done a fair amount of reporting on these people, and I know you travel a lot, you have business meetings, there's an enormous amount of management to be done, and there is the business of keeping your staff up and running and training. Now, no one's asking you to be on the line, but I do wonder, how often are you in the kitchen and actually cooking?
I would say at least 50%. You have to still be at least 50%. I mean, I spent the last 3 days just making chocolates. Why? Because I never want to lose that touch. I think once you lose that touch and the skills, you tend to forget also who you are, where you came from, you know? So it's very important to also be with your staff. As a good chef always says, without their team, they're nothing. So it's very important.
That's why Puri sometimes you can see him raking on Mauritius on the beach, just getting the sand just right. There's a question right here, sir.
Yes, I was wondering what thoughts you might have from a menu development, operations, and revenue point of view of all-inclusive rates and all-inclusive F&B into the rule.
There are some people or some businesses or some companies that do it well. For instance, Sandals Resorts in the Caribbean for honeymooners. So it's a very niche market, very specialized, and they're doing, so you're going on a honeymoon and you don't have to worry about the drinks or whatever. But it's that, it smells a little bit of all-you-can-eat buffet, if you know what I mean. You know, you go to a buffet, it's $8.99, all you can eat.
That's not
Who are you going to
luxury.
get?
Yeah.
Who's your customer? So I've never done it. I hope I never have to do it.
Puri, can you balance for us I get the buffet analogy, but I think also in the world of luxury travel, there is this kind of gouging sensibility that you have to be careful of on the other end, where everything is an upsell and everything you touch costs more money. This audience has heard me rail on the cost of Wi-Fi, for instance, in high-end hotels. How do you balance that? What is the point in the middle between not appearing to be an all-you-can-eat buffet and not appearing to be looking to get every last dollar?
I think yesterday there was one session where there was a mention of generosity, or it may have been Anna who was talking about generosity at Aman Resorts. And it's that sense of generosity, you know, when you go to breakfast in the morning, or when you go to see what's in the mini bar or whatever, that there's a sense of generosity. And people get that. They know what they need to pay for, what they have to pay for, and there are other things they know that they expect them to be just there. And that it is a balance, but it's easy to obtain, to be able to just do a lot of things that are just naturally there.
So how do you see like the technology will take place in terms of the F&B next year, maybe like for the trend? Like how, because nowadays we have like this virtual reality, augmented reality. So how do you see the trend will be going for the technology?
Drinks by drone.
I actually really wanted to cover that topic.
Please do.
Well, but recently I was just at a Bradentown conference. It was a 3-day event in Mugaritz in Spain. And Heston's team was there, and everybody else which was into food and technology was there. 18 brain scientists. So we're like, why would there be 3 chefs and 18 brain scientists in one place? The reason is, I mean, we're all moving forward with technology, and I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of technology, and I really think we need technology in what we do. And
would 3D printers, for instance, help you?
That would be one, but most importantly, I mean, also in terms of robotics. I think we're going to have our first chef robot here next year. Andoni will be the robot. He will be making, doing some cooking in Spain. And in our Jurong Science Center, there the robot will be making exactly what he's making in Spain. So this is really happening. And I would say for sure we cannot ignore technology, I guess even for restaurants and hotels.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. We need to be able to leverage technology. I think hospitality as an industry, we're the most backwards of all industries. There's no question about that. It takes a while before we get it. You know, we do finally sometimes get it, but we need to learn how to leverage technology better.
But you need a fine balance.
Yeah, I would think so, because if I show up at your hotel and there's a robot to help me,
that would never happen.
Good.
But there's ways
I'm relieved to hear that. I'm relieved to hear that. Do you have some final thoughts for us?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about a couple of things, some observations. Here's an interesting observation. The baby boomers, when they were 37 years old, they became a significant part of the economy and were really the largest contributors. And today, the millennials are also 37 years old, and they are today the biggest strength. So just an observation to be able to think about what is happening.
And it's a horror to be from Generation X, because you're caught between these two powerhouse generations.
Between the baby boomers and the millennials, it's really happening. I think also gastronomy is becoming a conversational currency. It's driven by social media, and the embrace of experiential activities has become so important. You know, where they go to a grammed brunch, where it's all about different grams and different cereals and so on, to going and tasting it, lining up at Dominic Ansell's place to be able to buy a cronut.
Well, Puri, lining up there or lining up at Janice's to get a dessert thing as well. But both of those endeavors are, as you say, driven by social media. And social media has been a big part of your, not even driven by you, but driven by your customers, a big part of your brand extension, if I can use that term. How do you interact with social media?
You use it. I will always say you use it, but you don't follow it. We have always been ahead. So if I rely on only social media and the new trend comes, we would suffer. So again, social media is great for what we do. We use that platform, and we basically allow, now even in Japan, I mean, we just made a new Instagram account, just for the sake of putting photos on and people can see it. But again, as I said, trends are moving so fast forward, you don't know which is the new trend, which is the new app that's going to take on. We can't follow it, yeah.
Talking about Instagram, what is the most Instagrammed restaurant in the US? Does anybody know?
I don't. What is it?
The Sugar Factory in New York. Yes. The second one is the Nobu in Malibu. The third one is Tao in New York City. And the fourth, my favorite, is Katz's Deli in New York City.
Oh, that's a good, send a salami to your boy in the army. That's
and,
a good
you
picture.
have to take a picture, because if you didn't take a picture, were you really there? Right?
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Vaguely depressing.
I think also what's happening is that gastronomy is really replacing material goods as a status marker. Where all have you been? Where all have you eaten? What have you done? It's really, I mean, I think going out and buying a bag versus going out and eating at Iraqi in London and spending a significant amount of money has become probably more important.
And we saw a little of that in your research, yes? That there's a decline in luxury buying and an uptick in consumption of fine dining and wine.
Yeah.
Which is good news, I guess, against the relative bad news from a bottom line perspective of big alcohol sales and steak sales.
I just want to mention a couple of more things. I think...
Boy, you're on a roll.
Yeah.
Just brought a notebook.
Just as fashion or music, food has become a way for young people. to express themselves. And I think it's about connoisseurship. I think it's about conversational currency. It's about connectedness so that they know where did the stuff come from, understanding the culture, understanding the values. And, you know, connoisseurship in terms of tea classifications. You know, earlier you went to a restaurant and said, would you like a cup of tea? Yeah, can I have a Lipton's tea? Today it's, you know, can I have a lapsang souchong? Can I have a sencha? Can I have a hojicha?
Puri, let Janice jump in on that, because his tea selections are crazy with you as well as sake, and this is a whole new world that we didn't see 10 years ago, yes?
Yes, for sure. Like I said, the education. People just really want to know, not even the food, but again the beverage, where it comes from. Where's this tea being brewed? Is it a high quality? Is it low quality? I think it's very important. Even I want to know where even my water comes from these days. So I guess for sure it's definitely trending. It's different. And like what Puri said, I think it's. He's got more to share, I think.
Well, just a couple of more things. One is food hall style eating. I mean, those of you that are here from the US, you know how well Italy has done in New York and in Chicago. You've got now Latinicity in Chicago. You've got the Bourdon Market, which is coming up in 2017. Anthony Bourdon, from all his travels around the world, is going to set up a food hall in New York City.
And is it going to work? Hands up if you say yes, that Anthony Bourdain can bring all that food from across the world, bring hawker culture into New York City. I see how many hands? Who says it will not work? Wow, I'm with you, sir. We shall see. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's going to work because people want to be able to eat. And I was going to talk about that in terms of Asian food. How popular Asian food has become. You go to London and you see a restaurant called Hoppers. You know, somebody's taken Sri Lankan food, and to be able to do it in a beautiful, tiny little setting, but is serving authentic, wonderful food. We're seeing Rangoon Diner. We're seeing Laotian cuisine. We're seeing lots of Vietnamese cuisine places opening up. So I think the Asian food is definitely is the way to go.
So we started out, I think, kind of. I mean, I was trending towards sad face a little bit about the future of food and wine in luxury travel, and I'm ending with a happy face. It seems like we're gonna be okay, folks. It sounds like we're gonna be okay. And I would like to thank you, Puri, and you, Janice, for helping us get to that smiley face and joining us here at the Luxury Travel Conference with the New York Times. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was great.